Hi, everybody, and welcome. Here we are at the Soul of Hunger Forum. I'm very sorry that I can't be there today with all of you. I'd really been looking forward to sharing our JBJ Soul Kitchen story with you while listening and learning to how we, together, can make a difference to alleviate hunger here in our community. I'd like to thank our Governor, Chris Christie, for his continued support and for his presence here today. He and his staff have shown their true commitment to this very important issue of addressing hunger here in the Garden State. I'd like to give a shout out to our friends Tom Colicchio and his wife Lori Silverbush, the filmmakers responsible for producing A Place at the Table, and Lori, the documentary's co-director. You're both an inspiration to us. Finally, I'd like to thank the Food Bank of Monmouth and Ocean County and the New Jersey Anti-Hunger Coalition for sponsoring this event with us and for their boots-on-the-ground effort and compassion shown in the work that they do every day. If you recognize the setting, I'm on the new set of the Today Show with the co-anchor and my dear friend Savannah Guthrie. Thank you for helping me, Savannah.
Oh, we're so happy to have you here. Normally we would make you sing, but today we're going to talk about something that's very near and dear to you. I've been to the Soul Kitchen. This is a labor of love for you and for Dorothea and the foundation. Tell us about the inspiration.
Well, we began this process over 3 years ago in a church basement, right in Red Bank, right where we are, folks. And we did a survey asking if the restaurant that we were trying to create was something that could serve the community. It was a resounding success. And with the lessons learned there, we went down the street to what was a soup kitchen called Lunch Break and continued our partnership with the community. We took the lessons of both of those places and incorporated them into what is now our retail space, which you have visited, the JBJ Soul Kitchen. The Soul Kitchen is a warm and welcoming place that empowers people to feed themselves and their families. And I must underline this one point. It is not a hand out, but rather a hand up. Food insecurity is not an easy thing for people to face or to admit. As we've seen in the film and have witnessed here in our own community, and you'd be surprised how many people are struggling to make ends meet just to get food on the table. People from all walks of life. We've seen them all.
You talk a lot about the power of we. How does that play itself out in this context?
Well, we really do believe in that power of we, and we believe that there is a place for everybody at the table. But in order to truly address this issue of hunger, we need participation and partnerships. What we need is all levels of government, local, state, and federal. They have to come together and communicate with each other. The philanthropic community has to be involved. Nonprofits, both direct services as well as those involved in advocacy work. We need businesses and we need civic associations, and most importantly, we need individuals like all of you here today who care about members of their communities without stigmas attached. Because something as simple as food can bring people together, and as we have seen, it leads to the opening of other doors. Today we're seeing more than ever people are in need and reliant on food pantries to feed their families. In my opinion, food pantries should be a safety net and not a replacement for programs.
You really do believe everybody's got a place at this table?
We do believe in that. We believe that there is a place at the table because we believe in empowerment and inclusion. We believe that there's an opportunity in America, the richest country on the planet, to take on this issue of hunger. Food is an apolitical issue. Food security is not a privilege, it's a human right. We've always said that it doesn't take a scientist to find the cure, that the cure lies in the will of the people to invest in ourselves. It's education, inspiration, then emulation. We believe that by affording people their dignity and removing the stigma of food insecurity, and through an open and an honest dialogue, that we can change the perception of what it is to be hungry in America. And then together, we can affect change.
Well, this is good work you're doing. We want to thank everybody who will be participating in these discussions. John and I hope that everyone takes a look at what their place is at this table. Thanks.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks for being here.
Hi, I'm Dorothea Bon Jovi. First, I'd like to thank our witnesses to hunger. I thought they were very brave to share their stories today. And I'd like to thank everyone for joining us. Now, I'd like to have you join me in welcoming our moderator for this next session. You may recognize him from the NBC Today show, or maybe you've seen him as the co-anchor of MSNBC's Morning Joe. Willie Geist is an author, news correspondent, and video blogger. We thank him for taking time today and helping us, and we know he will bring focus to this discussion of hunger. Please welcome Mr. Willie Geist. Our next two panelists are native New Jerseyans. Tom Colicchio was born and raised in Elizabeth, New Jersey. You may know him as an amazing chef and successful restaurateur, but he has also been a longtime advocate of food issues, having testified in front of Congress in 2010 on the importance of school lunches for thousands of kids who rely on those lunches for their daily nutrition. He's the executive producer of A Place at the Table, the documentary you saw today. He is a husband, a father, and an activist who is committed to the issue of healthy food as a right for all, not a privilege for a few. His passion for this issue is surpassed only by his commitment. Ladies and gentlemen, John and my good friend, Chef Tom Colicchio. We also welcome our next panelist, who hails from Newark, New Jersey. Governor Christie started his career as a lawyer. In 2002, he was appointed the U.S. Attorney General for the District of New Jersey. He held that post for 6 years. After becoming governor in 2010, he faced some difficult challenges. He made tough decisions and reached across party lines to effect change. 11 months ago, our Jersey Shore was devastated by Sandy. People lost their homes, businesses were wiped out, lives were lost. In the hours and days following Sandy, Governor Christie showed his strong leadership and once again made difficult decisions. He put the needs of people ahead of politics. He and his wife, Mary Pat, have proven time and time again their commitment to rebuilding and the recovery of the Jersey Shore. We are honored to have him participate in our forum today, and as we start this dialogue, we look forward to learning what can be done to help those members of our community that struggle with food insecurity. Ladies and gentlemen, John and my friend, the governor of the great state of New Jersey, Governor Chris Christie.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for being here. I think we all three want to start by thanking Dorothea and John Bon Jovi for their leadership on this issue. So you got three Jersey boys up here. We got Livingston, Elizabeth, and Ridgewood. So representing North Jersey pretty hard here, right?
Yes.
So we know of what we speak on this issue. Governor, let me start with you. You're out in the middle of a campaign right now for re-election. Why is it, or do I have it wrong, that we don't hear more about the issue of hunger, not just in your campaign, but in government, in political campaigns? Why isn't it when you have 50 million people hungry in this country, why don't we talk about it more?
Well, I think there's a few reasons. One, I think a lot of the people who are hungry don't talk about it. And there's a certain factor that goes along with, we see this with people, their reluctance sometimes to approach getting assistance. And it takes a while before a lot of people are willing to approach, whether it's a food bank or pantry or other folks who are helping. There's some reluctance there. As a result, it's not places out front by those folks who are actually going through the problem. And I also think that it's at times a very difficult conversation to have in public life because of the nature of the problem is both a short-term problem and a long-term problem. And, sometimes people in public life have a difficult time talking about one of those at a time, let alone both. So I think there's a couple reasons why that is. I don't think it's because people don't understand how important an issue it is. I think it's a really complicated issue and does not lend itself to kind of soundbite politics. And I think that's why you don't hear as much of it as you might otherwise expect to hear of an issue that's that core to people's everyday lives.
Tom, you and I were talking backstage. I think part of it, too, is people don't understand the scope of it. When you talk about 1 in 6 Americans aren't sure where their next meal is coming from, they have food insecurity, that is epidemic, but it's not treated as such in public life.
No, and it's not. It's not out there. Part of it doesn't poll. We know people of low income aren't out there voting. It's not an issue that a lot of people want to talk about. I also think, sort of going to the first question, it's been demonized a lot. When we talk about people who receive SNAP and assistance, we talk about takers, we talk about people who are sort of deadbeats and those unwilling to work are things like that. And we really need to change the conversation away from that and talk about what it really does do. Talk about this idea of investing in the future. When kids show up for school and they're hungry, they can't learn. It's just impossible. And so we need to look at this as an investment to get people back to work. And we just need to change the conversation around what the programs do, who they're for, who's receiving it. We know that the majority of people who receive SNAP have at least one member of the family working. We also know that before you receive SNAP the year before and the year after you're working. We also know, people think there's widespread fraud in the system. We also know that it's only 1% fraud in the system. And we also know that this is really a program that supports working poor, the elderly, children, and people with disabilities. And so it's a widespread program, programs like SNAP, and I think we need to start talking about what they do in terms of investing in the future and making America stronger.
So why do you think it is then, Governor, that when we start talking about public budgets and things to cut, we seem to always hear about SNAP or food stamps? It's an easy place to cut, perhaps because of what you said earlier, which is that they don't have political clout, the people who are suffering.
Well, and that's part of it. But I also think that you can't say that universally. I think if you look at what's happened here in New Jersey over the last number of years, we've not only not cut those programs, we've increased them in response to the enormous effect that the recession had on this state. The recession had a greater effect on our state than on many states in the country. And many more folks, and I think this has been one of the things that's brought hunger to a bit of a greater awareness now than it was before, because a lot of folks now had neighbors and friends who needed help. And when it becomes personalized to more folks, and it becomes personalized to people in power and authority, then it becomes different. And a lot of the stigma that Tom was referring to, which exists broadly across the country, I think has been diminished here in a place like New Jersey, because you saw the food bank in Ocean and Monmouth counties go up, their demand go up in, I think it was 2010, nearly 100%. Well, when that's happening in what is perceived, at least in New Jersey, to be fairly affluent counties, and while Ocean and Monmouth have their pockets of poverty, they're perceived as fairly affluent counties. When you start seeing the demand in those counties go that high, then it becomes personalized to a lot of folks. So in New Jersey, I think we've taken kind of the opposite approach in large part because it started to affect more people's lives, and folks know that it's not the easy thing to cut because those faces are now personal to them, and that makes it different.
Tom, you've dedicated an awful lot of your time and your energy and your resources to this issue. In addition to all you do running your restaurants, why is it so important to you?
You know, I think for the last 30 years, I've been very active in raising money for hunger issues and hunger awareness issues, working with groups like Share Our Strength and Feeding America and our local food banks in New York. And then when my wife started making the film, halfway, sort of into it, we started grappling with the idea of this being a problem that was too big for charities to tackle, that this is something that government has a role in, a very big role to play in. And that sort of led me to sort of just get much more active about the messaging around sort of the hunger issue, and to just sort of, I went through a sort of a personal sort of struggle myself, and to realize that as much as I thought I was helping, I really wasn't. And so it just became time to get a little more active and activist around the issue of hunger. In New Jersey, and I think you're right, the demand is there and it's growing, but the state is still, I think, 48th out of people that are eligible to receive food stamps and yet are not going out and getting them. And I think it's a problem because people who there's need there, so we're not addressing the need. We can talk about programs to get people working, which is great. I know you've been very active in doing that, and we can talk about work training programs, and that's great, but there is still a need that is there that we're not addressing. And I don't think, New Jersey should be 49th in anything.
Well, listen, and part of that is, I think, the stigma that you talked about, because it's not that the food stamp program is not available to them;
Right.
it's that folks don't want to access it.
But I guess then the question is, how do you create messaging here in New Jersey to let people know that it's a program that works and it's a program that people should take advantage of? And especially if we don't want to talk about feeding people, we can talk about the economic stimulus. I mean, I think if we raise our participation in New Jersey by 10%, that's $1.2 million to monies coming in, which then has a multiplier effect that will sort of, really create a stimulus here in New Jersey.
Well, I think part of the challenge is to try to do it through the schools, which we've been trying to do. I mean, and that not only through both our breakfast program and our lunch program is a way to try to help the problem Tom referenced in one of his earlier answers about, children who are hungry at school have a difficult time learning at all. But in addition, that's one of the places where parents can generally feel safe. And instead of making them go to a public assistance office, to go to the county seat, to try to get them educated in the program through their children, is one of the ways that we're trying to increase the participation level in this.
Right.
And that's, I think, an easier way for these folks to be able to access this without feeling some of the stigma that goes along, and especially when you're dealing with folks who have not always been low-income folks. But you have folks who were middle-income folks who have lost jobs because of the recession and have found themselves now in this situation. For those folks, the stigma is even more stark and more difficult for us to overcome.
Right.
And they wind up going to the volunteer places more
Yeah.
than they're willing to go to the government. They'll go to the food
and those
bank.
pantries are so taxed right now.
They are, and they're more apt to go there than they will be to go to the to Freehold or to go to the county seat in Ocean, to be able to Tom's River, to be able to get access to these programs.
I'm glad you're bringing up breakfast because I think in New Jersey it's called Breakfast After the Bell. It's a great program to get kids eating during the school period as opposed to early. Early, there's obviously a stigma attached, especially when the kids are older.
Yeah.
Also, there's a problem with kids sort of getting transportation early to school. And so the Breakfast After the Bell program is great. And I know New Jersey has done, some great strides. I think they increased their participation from kids that are eligible for free or reduced breakfast to kids that are actually participating, increased their scores by 16%, but we're still 46th out of 51, including the district. And so we can do better there. Also, now obviously we want to feed children, but there was a study done recently by Deloitte, No Kid Hungry, where math scores go up by 17% for kids that have breakfast in first period, not breakfast before school starts, breakfast in first period. And so this is a great program that just needs to really sort of just grow. And I know, again, it's grown by 16% and just really needs to grow. And that is a way, again, not only to get kids fed, but also we know that math scores increase. We also know that they're sort of getting in trouble less. There's less issues with absenteeism. And I believe if we get the numbers up to a rate that sort of people are suggesting at the 60-70% level, it's an additional $25 to $30 million coming into the state again. And what's important about that is the breakfast program is actually more profitable when you actually bring in the reimbursement than the lunch program. So it's actually a win-win for the school districts as well.
Well, it is, and one of the things there's been a disincentive to make the lunch program work because of what New Jersey's done to connect the lunch program numbers to other school aid. And so what's happened is that's where you find the fraud and the difficulty that we've seen in New Jersey is not on the breakfast side of things, but on the lunch side of things, because what's happening is some of the school districts are doing a twofer. They say they sign up somebody for the lunch program, don't give it to them, and then use the money to increase aid. And so that's part of where the stigma starts to come from, which makes it more difficult to make these programs, more understandable to the public. Mm-hmm. And then when you have the folks who drop into that level because of the economic difficulties we've had across the country, it makes it harder for them to get in. One of the things I also wanted to bring up was the idea that even we're having these problems in urban areas, even with folks who have the resources to be able to buy food. So you have this whole group that doesn't have the resources. Then you have a group that has the resources, but you have these food deserts in our urban areas where they can't get good, fresh food. So one of the things that we've been trying to do is to increase that. We're putting a pilot program into Camden where we're giving online access in public buildings for folks to be able to order groceries online, have them delivered back to whether it's the library or the school.
The virtual marketplace.
Right, and so we're doing that and in a way to give people the opportunity to get fresh fruit, to get fresh produce, when in a place like Camden, they don't have a supermarket that's going to be able to provide them the opportunity, even for those folks with the resources, or the folks, whether the resources are from their own employment or whether the food stamp program, they'll wind up going to very small places without fresh food, and so the kids don't even get an opportunity to have fresh vegetables or fresh fruit. Right. So that's one of the things we're trying to combat through giving them other ways to access this and make it easy for the delivery of the food as well.
Food desert is such an important topic. If you look at not just hunger but obesity, if you look at a map of Manhattan, and you look at the red line where the epidemic starts, it's 96th Street and north, just like that. If you live on 95th Street, you're very unlikely to be obese. If you live above it, it is. And it's all about socioeconomics. It's all about money. Why is it, to someone who doesn't live in one of those areas, that they can't get vegetables, they can't get fruits in those areas? I know you point in the movie that prices of fruits and vegetables have gone up over the last 3 decades as commodities have gone down. Why can't they get some produce in those neighborhoods?
Purchasing power. If you don't have purchasing power, if community doesn't have purchasing power, you're not going to find a businessman to come in and open a store. And so this is, again, why SNAP is important, because it gives you additional purchasing power, and actually then people will come into community to sell, to open a store and to participate in that economy. The obesity issue is actually, it's a very interesting piece, because hunger and obesity are very closely linked. And they don't appear to at first blush, but when you have very little dollars, you're going to buy the cheapest food possible. I always say that calories are cheap, nutrition's expensive. And so if you have to go out and feed your family, you're going to buy the cheapest stuff possible. Unfortunately, it's not the most healthy food in the world. And so, but that's something we could do on a federal level when we talk about subsidies. We have $20 billion in subsidies. 85% goes to corn, wheat, and soy, the commodity crops. 15% goes to meat and dairy. 1% to fruit and vegetables. And so we need to make that shift and actually start sort of supporting farmers that are going to grow healthy food, as opposed to big ag business that is going to reap the benefits of used subsidies and then produce processed foods that isn't really helpful.
But that goes back to what you said earlier. And you point out in the film as well, is political clout.
Yeah.
The small farmer doesn't have the political clout the agribusiness does, so they get the subsidies.
We can get into a whole different discussion about money and politics.
Yeah.
That's probably not for today.
But that's central to why you're not seeing those foods in some of those neighborhoods.
Yeah, it's part of it, but it's also purchasing power.
Right.
If the demand is there, people will fill that demand.
So Governor Christie, what are some of the better ideas you've heard of? I know in New Jersey you have programs like Patterson Promise is one. Seeing a lot of this public-private partnership in New Jersey.
Well, part of what I was saying in the first answer that I gave about it being both a short-term and a long-term problem. The short-term part of the problem is a lot of what Tom and I have been discussing already. Is how do you deal with the child that we need to get fed and get the proper nutrition so they can learn in school today. But then, obviously there's the long-term issues that lead to this, where we have the long-term economic problems that Tom kind of just touched on before, but are the things that we need to do to solve this problem in the long term. And so things like Patterson Promise is a partnership that we're doing with the Harlem Children's Zone in Patterson, where we start right from birth with baby schools for the parents to talk to them about all the different things you need to do with a child from the time of birth to be able to get them ready for school, to get them ready for success. And we've seen that work in Harlem in a significant way, and it's now going on in Patterson as well. We teach them about nutrition. We teach them about the things that are important in terms of reading to children and the children's exposure to music and the things that we know activate the brain in a way that is going to help those children be ready when they get to the preschool age and regular school age. So programs like that are helpful, have been helpful, but also, dealing with families and the problems that families have which contribute to this issue. So we've opened, 20 more family success centers around the state, which are centers where these families can go. They're centered in urban areas to learn some of the skills that they need. And I'm not even talking about employment skills, although they do some of that as well. But these are the skills of dealing with and running a family. And how do you do those things, focusing them on what's important, focusing them on making the choices that they need to make that will help to enhance the health of their family. And whether that's access to health care through New Jersey Family Care or our expanded Medicaid program now, all of those things contribute to what we're talking about up here. And I think having a broader view of this doesn't replace having to do the things that we're talking about now. But it is, you have to run them on parallel tracks. You have to do both. You can't just do one. You do just the short term, you're never going to fix the long-term problem. If you do just the long-term, we're losing too many people in the short term to the health problem. So we need to do both.
Tom, who else would you like to see at the table? We've talked about government, we talked about charities. We know they can't do them alone. Who else needs to be brought into this conversation?
I think the business sector. If you have a lot of people who are very smart at running their own businesses, sort of get together and put their heads together around hunger and how to solve hunger. I think part of the problem is that we've been too sort of focused on the idea of managing hunger and not ending hunger. And we need to get people together to look at how to end this once and for all. I mean, we did it back in the 60s, in the late 60s. We show this in the film. There was a film that came out at CBS in 1968, 69, and there was a response to, first of all, people were shocked. And there was a response, but there was a response in Congress, in the Senate. Dole and McGovern got together, created the safety net, signed into law by Nixon, and so this was there was a time when and I'm not, I mean, you clearly are focused on this issue of New Jersey, but hunger, especially when you look at the recent vote in the House, has become a bipartisan issue. And it never was that. It was all, how do we fix this together? And we pretty much got rid of it, so we know how to end it. We just need the will. We need public will to get together and say, enough is enough. We can't have a sixth of our population hungry and think that we're a strong country. We can't. And so I think that big minds need to get together and create the sort of right programs, but also a messaging campaign to actually change public perception on, again, who is needy, how to fix those problems, and why it's a good idea, why it actually helps our healthcare system when we have healthy people who know how to eat and who can eat well and who can afford to eat, how it taxes our education system when you have a teacher and they're constantly forget about actually just teaching, when someone is irritable because they're hungry and they're acting out, and that person gets more of your resources. So if your kids are in public school and you have a kid who's hungry in that class, and a lot of them are, they're going to get a lot of attention. So instead of teaching, you're going to deal with problems. And so this really affects society. It affects society on the small level, state by state, community by community. But as a country, we should not deal with 1 in 6 being hungry.
Well, I know you are leading sort of this PR fight, but we were talking earlier, I think a lot of people think hunger, they think of commercials they saw in the 1980s of children in Africa. They think of Sally Struthers doing those ads for a price of a cup of coffee today. I don't think people think that maybe the next town over from where I live, there are kids going to bed hungry at night.
There's hunger in every county in this country. So 1 in 6, Willie, you're on the subway in New York. Yeah. There are hungry people in that car. Yeah. You cannot point to that person unless they're really sort of down and out. But you can't point to any one of those people and say, oh, that's a hungry person. That's a hungry person. They don't look like hungry people, but they are. And again, you're right. There is a messaging campaign that sort of needs to go out there to get people to understand what hungry people look like and how we can fix this problem. So, yeah.
You've shown, Governor, we mentioned Hurricane Sandy. We've seen these moments of crisis where partisan lines do sort of fall away for a brief time, and we get together and get things done. Do you see hope on this issue within the state of New Jersey? Do you see Republicans and Democrats agreeing that this is a problem and willing to work together on it?
Well, listen, I see hope on lots of issues here, because I think unlike what the circus we're seeing down in Washington right now, here we have divided government,
I didn't even have to ask you the question here, and you went into it.
Well,
yeah.
We have divided government here in New Jersey. We've had it for all 4 years I've been governor, with Democrats controlling the legislature and me as the governor. And the fact is that we've gotten a lot of stuff done. And, you just have to decide what you're going to prioritize and what you think is important. And there are so many issues where Republicans and Democrats have general agreement.
They just talk about it.
That's right. I mean, and that's really the truth, Tom. I mean, the Senate President and I, Steve Sweeney, who's the head of the Iron Workers Local here in New Jersey. So, certainly not a guy who you would think would have a lot in common with a conservative Republican necessarily. But, Steve and I have made it our business. Every time we're in the State House together, we meet. And it doesn't matter whether we talk for 5 or 10 minutes about what we did on the weekend or how our families are, and we don't have any real business to discuss and we move on, or whether we're there for 2 or 3 hours discussing, issues that are really important and really hot, or even more time. My point on it is that in politics and in government, we have nothing to sell. Tom is a restaurateur and a businessman. He's got a product to sell. When you're in government, you don't have a product to sell. What you have are relationships. And government doesn't work if you don't have those relationships. And so the reason I see hope in what we're doing here in New Jersey is because we've made those relationships work. It doesn't mean we agree on everything, we don't, and it doesn't mean that we don't get on each other, we do. But that's what our country's supposed to be about. We're supposed to have robust debate in public, and that's the way it's supposed to work. But after you have the robust debate, then you have to sit down and end it.
I'm done.
Right? Like the debate is not the end. The debate's supposed to be the means to the end. And the end is, okay, solve this problem or move towards solving it, check, move on to the next thing. That's the way I always thought that was supposed to work. And I think it is working that way in New Jersey, which is why I have hope on this issue and other issues, because it really does, as Tom said, traditionally cut across party lines. It's not like a Republican or a Democrat inherently in their philosophical approach like to see people hungry and don't understand the downsides of it and the upsides of making sure people have appropriate nutrition and what that means for the country and the community that these folks live in. So I think part of this is the lack of hope is a symptom of a larger disease. And the larger disease is we're not listening to each other anymore. If you sit and you watch the film, if you listen to some of these problems, it's not hard to come to the right conclusions. As Tom said, we know how to solve these things. The problems that baffle me are the ones that we don't have a solution for. Right. The ones that anger me are the ones that we have a solution for, but we don't have the political will to bring to bear to make it happen.
So there was just the House just voted on a $40 billion cut. Before that, it was a $20 million cut. That didn't work out. The Senate's at $4.5 billion. Would a President Christie veto that bill?
Oh, well, hell. Probably. It's a good backdoor way to ask that question, Tom. Say this, I think.
I'm a guy from Elizabeth.
I understand.
I got to find a back door.
Yeah, no.
They wouldn't let me in the front.
Yeah, that's okay. The back door is always wide open, no problem. Listen, I think that, one, I don't know that much about the specifics of the bill, but let's say this. If you look at what we've done in New Jersey, I think it gives you a window into what someone would do if they had any other job where they had authority. And so if you look at the way we have tried to deal with making sure that the food banks are funded, making sure that we have access through both the breakfast and the lunch program on the upswing in New Jersey. We're making progress. And so I would never be in favor of something that retards progress on issues that are important as this. But, governing is about prioritizing too. So at some point, I say this to folks all the time in New Jersey, the easiest thing in politics to do, and the easiest thing for me to have said to Tom in response to that question would be, of course, yes, I would veto that. Because when you're in politics, the best word to say is yes, all the time, right? Because, I look at you and I try to figure out, she's like, well, what does she want? What does she want? What's important to her? I'm looking in her eyes and I kind of get a sense I'm listening, I figure it out, and then I say I'm for it, and then I pray to God she forgets that I said it when later on I don't do it. I'd much rather take a different approach, which is to say that the way we get ourselves in trouble in public life is to say yes to everything. It's about prioritizing and about choosing, because we don't have unlimited resources, and you don't want to give us unlimited resources, I suspect. You want to give us enough to make sure that we take care of those people who are truly in need, those people who really need help. You want to make sure we keep you safe and protected and keep our country safe and protected. And within that realm, we got to make choices. So the answer is, I don't know those bills, and I don't know what I'd do with them. But I do know that if you look at what we've done in New Jersey, we're going to making sure that people get the correct nutrition because of what it does to make our communities a better place, a priority. But you're also going to hear directly from me when there are times when I have to look at you and say no. And New York Magazine did a profile on me a few years ago, and the headline of the profile was, "The answer is no." And what my staff did was they Xeroxed that and they put it on the back, on the doors, inside of their doors in their offices. And so when lobbyists would come in to ask for the next program that they wanted to have, they would point to the sign and say, the boss said, the answer is no. We start off from a position of saying we've got to be honest with people and say we have to make choices. Then that's when the bipartisanship comes along, because everyone's going to have different priorities. So let's get around the table and decide. I wake up every morning having a Democratic legislature knowing I'm not going to get everything I want. Absolutely knowing. So that's a sense of security, you know? I mean, like, you don't wake up with any illusions. Like, I'm not going to get everything I want. All right. What can I get that I want, and what must I give to the other side to help the priorities that are most important to them, to get them to give me part of what I want, and I give it back to them. Compromise is not a dirty word. It is the word this country was built on. So what I'd always try to do in situations like the one you're talking about is, if there's this divided government, let's find the way where we can bring common ground, check the box, move on to the next issue.
So Tom, I'm going to continue with your hypothetical just for one more question here. Let's say that a President Christie were sitting here and it's January of 2017. Again, just hypothetically. What would you ask of him?
I don't have enough problems right now, right?
What would you ask of him on this issue of hunger?
Make hunger in the United States a priority. Make it a priority. And again, not only because I'm a bleeding heart liberal and I think that people should be fed, but I think there's a real economic incentive for doing it. I think there's healthcare costs associated with issues around hunger. It costs this country $160 billion plus a year. So we can fix that. I testified in front of Congress during the lunch reauthorization and had a general testify that only 25% of the recruits showing up to join the military were fit to fight. So this is a national security issue. And so it goes way beyond my knee-jerk liberal sort of need to take care of people.
Well, and I think, listen, part of this too is we all have an obligation who lead. And whether it is as an elected official or whether it is as a business leader or someone in the media, we have an obligation to articulate these things in a way that can help to build support. I think what Tom just said has a much greater chance of building broad support across the country when you lay out all of the factors that go into it, rather than just the Sally Struthers ad, okay? So the Sally Struthers ad is compelling and emotional, and I think on an emotional level, all of us connect to it, but then it goes away. Right. If it's not right in front of our face every day, it goes away. But if you make the argument on some of these issues, as Tom just did, that this is also about national security and our economic future, and our educational future for our children, well, then people start to take notice no matter where you live and whether you yourself or your children are hungry or not. You start to say, well, wait a second, this is going to have an effect on my country over the long term, and the economy my children are going to be entering, and the educational system they're benefiting or not benefiting from. So part of our job is, when you decide something's a priority, part of the fight is to get someone to articulate it to be a priority in public life. But then it's about them articulating it in a way that sells it to a broad spectrum of people, not just to bleeding heart liberals like Tom, but to sell it to people in the middle and to people on the right. And there are ways I've found on many issues to be able to do that. But you got to be thoughtful and you got to be willing to take risk. Because when you articulate it in a way, if you're on my side of the aisle, when you articulate it in a way that's attractive to Tom, you risk angering people on your side. If you're unwilling to take risk in public life, then you don't belong there. Because to build consensus, you got to take risks.
Yeah, and I think, Governor, that's why I think so many people admire you, because of the risk that you took, standing on principle and not ideology when it came to going to Congress and saying we need money to fix Sandy. And I really, I moved away from New Jersey. I live in New York, but that was when I was most proud to say, hey, that's where I'm from, because that's the place where work gets done. So
yeah,
thank you.
Thanks.
Gentlemen, thank you both for this discussion. I want to ask you one more thing, Governor, on another topic. You mentioned the shutdown that's 7 hours away at this point. How have Republicans handled this?
Well, I think everybody's handled it poorly. Everybody. Listen, it is by definition, if the government shuts down, which I assume it's going to in the next 7 hours, it is by definition a failure of everyone who's responsible for the system. Everyone. And see, because we knew this was coming, right? We've been talking about this since the summer, right? That this deadline was looming and what was going to happen, how was it going to play out. And everybody who has a role in this has a responsibility for avoiding it. Now, in New Jersey, back under my predecessor, the government shut down. And some people might remember in 2006 in New Jersey, or hopefully you don't, you've blotted it out. But, the government shut down over a fight between a fully controlled Democratic legislature and Democratic governor. And they shut down the government for days over the 4th of July weekend. Island Beach State Park was closed. People couldn't go there for 4th of July weekend. Public assistance was closed. All these things were closed. It's no matter where the partisanship is, the failure is in people not bringing people together to get it done. My approach would be, as the executive, is to call in the leaders of the Congress, the legislature, whatever you're dealing with, and say that we're not leaving this room until we fix this problem. Because I'm the boss, I'm in charge. When you're the executive, if you're waiting for leadership from the legislative branch of government, whether you're a governor or whether you're the president or whether you're a mayor, you are going to be waiting forever, forever, because they're not built to lead and take risk. What they're built to do is say, okay, how many votes do we have and how many do we need? And do I have to give my vote now, or can I hold back a little bit and wait to see which way the wind's blowing? The only person that forces that in the end to end that is the executive. And so while there is blame to go around for the Republicans in the House for not coming to consensus even amongst themselves about the right way to handle this, and the Democrats in the Senate for not looking for ways to try to compromise with the Republicans in the House, there's also blame that goes on to the president as well. When you see a crisis this far in advance, certain crises just jump on you as a leader. Hurricane Sandy had 3 days notice, right? Jumps on you, you try to be as ready as you can, and then you deal with the aftermath. This one we saw coming for months. And so the fact is that everybody involved, the speaker, the majority leader, the president, the minority leader of the Senate, and the minority leader of the House, they're the 5 leaders in Washington. They have an obligation to get in a room and get it done. And then, if people are being unreasonable, once you've given it your full chance, everybody sat down and talked, but I'd tell you what's going on in Washington now, they don't even talk to each other. They don't talk to each other. They don't get in the same room, they talk at each other. They have that stupid, what place I'd love to eliminate in Washington? See 2 spots that I would love to put a big international no sign through. You see these, they say, that microphone bank in the Congress, right, where they all run to talk to the reporters to say nasty things about the other side, right? It's like it's magnetic. It's like it's a magnet, and they're filled with metal, and they're just drawn to it, right? And then that little spot on the driveway outside the White House where they all come out of the West Wing and everybody's waiting there for them, and they stand there and kick the crap out of the president or anybody else they had just met with. If we were able to eliminate those 2 spots and instead said to them, here's the deal, you can go to those spots, but you can only go to those spots after you've actually had a real meeting where people have tried to really solve problems. Then you can go talk to the press. So, if this ever happened in New Jersey, which I will tell you, it happened, now 7 years ago, hasn't happened once in the last 4 years, even though we've had divided government. Happened when we had united government, didn't happen when we've had divided government, because this is what happens. We lock people in a room, and we say, listen, you either can come to an agreement and then you don't have to look at me anymore, or you're gonna have to sit here and look at me and have me go back and forth with you. That's a part of leadership. It's not all of leadership, but it's a part of it. And so I would hope, I was saying to my staff today, right now, if I were down there, I'd say listen, 7 hours to go, everybody, and guess where you're spending the next 7 hours? Right here in the Roosevelt Room, man. And we're not leaving until we get a solution to this problem. So, and that's not pie in the sky. Like, it's not like something that's hypothetical, because we've done it in our state with people that are very different. With a governor who comes from Livingston, with a Senate president who comes from Gloucester County and is a union head, and with a speaker who is a woman who comes from East Orange. 3 very different parts of our state culturally, 3 very different parts of our state politically, yet the 3 of us have come together to solve every major problem that has been put on our plate in the last 4 years together. If we could do it here with the really angry, nasty people we have in New Jersey, for God's sake, why can't you do it everywhere, you know? I mean,
But if you were the chief executive, if you were President Obama, and you already had the, I'm sorry, you see him cringe?
you know,
Okay, let's start over. You were President X.
Yeah, well,
And you had just passed a health care law, and it had been upheld by the Supreme Court, and a group of people came to you and said, we're not giving you a budget, we may not give you the debt ceiling unless you roll back your plan.
that's
You
where
would say to them
listen,
what?
Listen, I'm not going to get into a whole bunch of hypotheticals with you, Willie, except to say
Tom started
that's
it.
where I understand, but that's where the conversation starts. You can't solve it unless you get in a room and try to solve it. Get in a room and try to solve it. And yeah, I understand about hunger. I'm not asking these questions.
This is all
Like,
bonus
seriously.
time. This is all bonus
I
time.
am not asking. Do you think I want to answer these questions? I don't. Would you prefer me just to say, Willie, to hell with you. I'm not talking about this anymore. Willie, to hell with you. I'm not talking about this anymore.
Tom Colicchio, Governor Chris Christie, thank you all so much.
Thanks, Tom.
Another round of applause, please, for Tom, Willie, and the governor.